I'm Bob Metz, and this is Just Right on CHRW 94.9 FM, where we will be with you from now till noon. No, not right wing, just right.
Fade into color, and color into black and white. Under the bedclothes, everything will be alright.
519-661-3600 is always a number you can call to reach us if you want to join in on the discussion, or email us at feedback@justrightmedia.org. I'm going to be talking about, strangely enough, working into all this theme of capitalism, journalism, free speech, and truths versus falsehoods. We're going to be talking about, strangely enough, Marc Emery. And apparently the Montreal Film Festival is opening today, and they're finally going to be featuring that film that they made on Marc Emery called Citizen Marc, of which I'm in, and I'll be talking about that in the last quarter of the show. But it's not going to be about the pot issue. It's going to be about the Ayn Rand issue, believe it or not.
Hi, I'm Marc Emery, the Prince of Pot, and you're listening to 94.9 CHRW. I will never, ever give up until this city is freed first and this nation second from the terrible shackles of marijuana prohibition. Kick it!
He wants to do what he thinks is right.
I am dedicated enough to be willing to go to jail.
This was a guy who didn't just break the law, he flouted the law.
Marc Emery is very much a media creation.
This is a war. It's a dirty war.
For your right to party!
I don't think I used the word megalomaniac lightly.
But unwilling to compromise his ideals at any price.
You say you're not a real solution.
He is a drug dealer.
These guys are working for the United States.
USA, go home!
Marc was in jail because he's a political activist. That's why they went after him, is because of what he says, not because of what he was doing.
This man is a hero.
It's always been my destiny to do this, and it's been my destiny probably to go to jail for this.
I am never going to stop. It is till liberty or till death.
Wow, starring John Galt himself. Do I actually know this guy? I just received permission yesterday morning from Marc Emery, the so-called Prince of Pot, currently serving time in a Mississippi prison, to share the following piece of correspondence with you. I'm actually raising this issue now not to discuss the pot issue, but to offer yet another example of the coming wave of what seems to be Ayn Rand hatred, and the form it will likely take. Ad hominem character assassinations of the people who publicly admire Ayn Rand. So I guess I'm setting myself up for something here, I don't know. And Marc's comments were also about the role of the Fourth Estate as a legitimate source of public information, an estate that includes writers and columnists like Gary Weiss that we were talking about, and your everyday average columnist. Marc's comments were certainly unsolicited in any way, and I thought Marc had no way of knowing I was discussing this very theme on our current run of Just Right shows. When I was CC'd a copy of the correspondence, I asked Paul McKeever to ask Marc if I could quote him. Now, Paul McKeever is on a short list of approved people who are permitted to communicate with Marc while he's in jail. And that's mostly because of the documentary that Paul himself produced on Marc Emery, his own documentary called The Principle of Pot. And, of course, all correspondence in and out of the jail is monitored and restricted, both in terms of length and in terms of certain content. And the funny thing is, as of this date, Marc and Paul have never met in person, though they've talked on the phone together a few times. One of those times, in fact, having been on this very show while Marc was in the process of being extradited to the United States. If you want to hear that show, it's show number 137 online. And that was when Marc appeared as a guest on the show, along with in-studio guest Paul McKeever. And you can hear them both online at justrightmedia.org. Again, show 137. That was back on January 28th, 2010. Now, in an email exchange between Marc and Freedom Party leader Paul McKeever, on the issue of the Citizen Marc documentary, which debuts tomorrow at the film festival in Montreal. That Montreal Film Festival actually begins today, believe it or not. And it's produced and filmed by a fellow named Roger Larry. Now, Marc has expressed his expectation that the documentary will be a complete smear attempt on him. Marc is, of course, still locked up in his Mississippi prison as a consequence of the Harper government having extradited him to the U.S. for ostensibly breaking American laws on Canadian soil, if that's not weird enough already. Marc was extradited and jailed more specifically for his public advocacy of legalizing pot. That was actually on the extradition papers, which is the singular distinction I think Marc had with all the hundreds of other pot seed sellers online in the country, as opposed to seed sellers who, don't do public advocacy, I guess. Or as opposed to, say, Justin Trudeau, who does advocacy but doesn't sell seeds online. Apparently it's okay to do one or the other, but not both. We discussed all of these things on past broadcasts of the show. Now, I myself have to say I've appeared in no fewer than 3 documentaries made on or about Marc Emery, the most recent being Roger Larry's Citizen Marc. And we did the filming for that for a couple of years ago already. It must be 2 years, maybe 3. It's been a while now, and it's only getting released now. And before that, it was Paul McKeever's Principle of Pot, produced in 2010, so that's getting pretty close to that same time period. And of course, the first notable documentary on Marc Emery I appeared in was way back in the early 90s, called Messing Up the System, which was produced by the late Chris Doty, who is also known for his documentary on the Storybook Gardens' Slippery the Seal, if you recall. Now, Messing Up the System was produced in Marc's pre-pot advocacy days and ends at the point where Marc parts ways with Freedom Party, all of his past political crusades like Sunday shopping, freedom of speech, and with the City of London itself as he departed on his world tour walkabout. It wasn't until a few years after Messing Up the System was produced that Marc returned to Canada, re-established himself in Vancouver, BC, which is where he has resided since returning, at least until his extradition. And that's where he started Cannabis Culture, both the publication and the social and political culture surrounding it. And the rest is, as they say, a fascinating history that can be seen in amazing detail and insight in at least 2 of these 3 documentaries cited. We don't know about the third one for sure yet until after its release over the coming week in Montreal. Now, all that's just a bit of history and background. Remember, this is not about the pot issue per se, but about the documentary film Citizen Marc, titled after Marc's own appreciation of the movie Citizen Kane, and also the title of Chris Doty's play about Marc, which was also called just Citizen Marc. And on my first spotlight on Marc here on Just Right that we did way back on November 1st, 2007, believe it or not, we called that one Citizen Marc Goes to Washington. So here it is, and this is Marc writing here. This was intended as personal correspondence directly to Paul McKeever, which is why I felt it appropriate to ask permission, of course, before I would read it on the air. And this is what he wrote to Paul. Quote, "Oh, that Citizen Marc doc. Yikes. Jody is furious with how slanderous it is." By the way, Jody is Jody Emery, Marc's wife. "She just hates it. I won't see it until I'm out. But of those who saw it in the previews, several wrote me about it, none liked it. It's a peculiar thing, too. As documentaries go, their purpose, as I see them, is to reveal an issue or circumstance that the public ought to know more about as a matter of public policy affecting people or the environment. Usually government or major vested interest is doing something that needs more light shone on it. A crisis of sorts is revealed and explained. Or perhaps a powerful individual or entity is doing something that has a widespread effect, for better or worse, that needs addressing. Interestingly, that very point was brought up in a conversation between myself and Robert Vaughn that we were having when our anti-capitalism theme began a few weeks ago. But Marc continues. Roger Larry's peculiar endeavor, the assertion that I am a megalomaniac narcissist out to self-aggrandize, is an odd theme, because I am not now or ever have been in elected office. I hold no power over anyone, nor have I ever. I have never advocated any legislation that would impose tribulation or obligation on anyone. I own no business entity with any pronounced impact on anyone, like in the movie Citizen Kane, where Kane owns a chain of powerful and critical newspaper and radio chains. I have used my own money to essentially promote my own at times popular, sometimes not popular, agenda. The movie does not allude that I've hurt anyone. If documentaries are supposed to alert people to the machinations of the powerful or to an imminent danger, then this hit piece on me is odd indeed. Roger Larry has always been a bit obsessed with my ideology, and here's where it comes. He particularly despises Ayn Rand. At first, I thought this wouldn't make any difference in his research and filmmaking, but I was wrong. In one episode of Citizen Mark, he demonizes my mother as a tyrant, based on my fond recollection of an amusing story. I used to tell my mom this story of my earliest recollection of my mom, me sitting on the potty at age 1, with my mom looming over me, clearly unimpressed that there's nothing in the potty, and we have to go somewhere. It's a funny story, but when I tell this in the documentary, he actually gets a psychiatrist from UBC interviewed saying this kind of childhood trauma can lead to narcissism and a Jesus complex. And then this is embellished with a cartoon of my mom as a tyrant. And man, is that weird. I had a wonderful childhood, and I have only great memories of growing up with my parents, so demonizing my mom is really annoying. But it's one of the many annoying things in the documentary. Believe me, already there's universal agreement that your, referring to Paul McKeever, principle of pot, interpretation of Marc as Jesus' figure is superior interpretation as well as superior filmmaking. And Roger received $700,000 to do this bad job. It is because Roger does harbor an anger against my Ayn Rand-inspired belief system. He was sending me these socialistic books in here and writing me emails that were all collectivist socialist stuff that I clearly was not having any part of it. But I'm sure the investors of that $700,000 are really disappointed. It's poorly done with huge gaps and omissions as well as fruitless avenues taken. Much is made of my womanizing or attraction to women, though as a private citizen. I'm not named Pastor Emery or Reverend Emery and not in elected office and previously on film record as being in favor of as much sex as one can get, and hardly a poster boy for monogamy. Oh well, it will indulge the haters, and that bothers Jody, but such things happen. If I were you, again referring to Paul McKeever, wherever you see the promotion for Citizen Mark, advertise your DVDs of the Principle of Pot because it's a good sales opportunity. Your documentary is going to be superior in every way. Many people who are quoted in the film have been disappointed how their quotes were used out of context and focused on my sexual or womanizing attributes, which in every interviewee's case made up a very small and minor part of the interview. I'll be curious to see what you think, Paul, of you and of your and Bob's comments, referring to me in this case. End quote. And as will I will be curious to see what's going to come out of this movie in terms of what comments they're going to leave in or whether they left all of my stuff on the floor. I shot for no less than 3 hours for that movie, so I've got some time put into this. And I got suspicious when they posed me around all these stuffed tigers, black and white tigers. So I'm thinking, what are they trying to do with this scene? But it might be a while before I get a chance to see it. But there you see the same pattern again, that irrational hatred of Ayn Rand combined with an attack on the people who are attracted to her ideas. And if Gary Weiss has done anything, author of Ayn Rand Nation, he has driven one point home to me, and that's only good news, that Ayn Rand does in fact matter. Now, just in closing now, running out of time here, but the Montreal Film Festival is running from today till September 2nd. Citizen Mark is as a color production. It's filed under Documentaries of the World, and I noticed they have scheduled projections, and they are tomorrow, Saturday, and Monday. So if anyone's in the Montreal area, Friday, August 23rd, 7 p.m., Saturday, August 24th, 12:20 p.m., and Monday, August 26th at 7 p.m. You can see all this and just search for it online. Google either for Marc Emery, or I guess just Google Citizen Mark, and actually you can Google Citizen Mark preview and actually see the preview that we just played the audio to. So I'm just very curious to see how that's going to happen. More on Ayn Rand Nation on a future broadcast of Just Right. And if you happen to be in Montreal this weekend, check out Citizen Mark and give us a shout to tell us what you thought, especially about that 10-second part with me in it, okay? Is that the best part or what? Uh-oh, better get out of here before I get accused of being a megalomaniac or something like that. I mean, consider the name of the show. Hey, better go before you think about it too much. Let's go. Join us again next week when we will continue our journey in the right direction. Until then, be right, stay right, do right, act right, think right, and be right back here. We'll see you.
Fade into color. and color into black and white. Under the bedclothes, everything will be alright.
25 years ago, my next guest was a major kingpin in the New York underworld. He was finally arrested. Those courts, they do their job. And he was sent away to jail where he served 18 long months. After paying his debt to society, he decided to go straight. He has his own chain of hardware stores and is planning on opening a branch right here in Fernwood. Please welcome Mr. Mario Dorsey, who overcame that grief, though, and certainly made a success of the hardware store business. And in fact, you've expanded several times.
I sure have, yeah. Well, I got to tell you, I don't mind competition. I really enjoy it, but you got to face it. We give them the best service in town.
Yeah, you must have done a very good job, because when you first went to Maxwell, there were 3 or 4 hardwares in town, and yours is the only one surviving now. Is that right? You guys have great service there.
Yeah.